the brief overview of what it looks like. It looks like a lot, but it is manageable. So VSLO opens in January. But that being said, not all of the like away rotation spots are open. But it's kind of when I would say probably now and into January is when you want to start thinking about where you want to go. Um, and it is an expensive process, so definitely take that into consideration. Uh, I know that there are some scholarship opportunities, especially if you come from like an underrepresented minority group. So that could be whether you're a woman, whether you're, whatever the criteria is. So definitely take advantage of that because I know it helped me. And essentially, they're going to touch on this later, but you want to make sure that you're coordinating with the people that you're rotating with. You don't want to have too much overlap because that's already some in-house competition, and you kind of want to still be recognized for you, not just, oh, another person from Robert Wood. So going into March is really when I'm sorry, April is when you start really submitting it, and ERAS opens in May. And you don't necessarily need to worry about ERAS then. The submission day is in September. So you'll most likely be submitting it while you're on a rotation somewhere. And then yeah, you're waiting until November-ish. We found out November 18th when interviews were released. And that's what a time that was. And yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. After that, you're gonna have to look at your schedule and kind of figure out what interviews you can accept, what interviews you might need to turn down. You could try emailing the program coordinator, but that doesn't really help. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Sydney said today you guys got your VSLO tokens, is that right? Does that allow you, like, can you open the app or do you just like register and say that like you're planning on using it eventually? I honestly don't remember. It's okay if you guys don't know.
I mean, I think it lets us log in and everything, like
Okay.
upload
Okay, good.
file.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. All right, good.
I think
Good.
your
So,
best friend is also to be looking at like some of these program specific websites. And some of them, like Hopkins, for example, has their own like separate what's it called, submission in addition to like VSLO. So that's some of the things that you need to look out for. And sometimes you even need to write like a little essay. One thing that I'm sure someone's going to touch on later is you can always start writing like your personal statement. And I suggest doing that earlier rather than later. Um, Even if it's like the worst first draft ever, because at least you're getting stuff down on paper and it only gets easier when you're, thinking about it peripherally. So yeah. And yeah, I mean, this is pretty much like basic stuff. Like there's a lot of people applying for, I'm sorry, my dog is bugging out in the background. But there's a lot of people applying for these spots, so you want to try to submit it on the earlier end. Especially if it's a place that you really want to go to. I think there was a stat saying that like 80% of people match at where they do an OA, so it is like pretty serious. Make sure that you have your CV like kind of ready and up to date because they're gonna expect that. And you can still have projects on there that aren't fully completed, like if they're in progress, any abstracts, any publications. Yeah, just make sure that that's really kept up to date because you're gonna need that for your ERS application anyway.
yeah, I want to emphasize the last thing that applications aren't exactly rolling. I submitted all of mine within like 1 to 2 days of their due date, and I still did not get my first choice like time block. I don't know if anybody else has similar issues, but it's like you definitely want to submit it on the first day if possible.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry, I guess I was supposed to, I moved that towards the end, I think.
Sorry.
Yeah, but essentially this was kind of like a spreadsheet that we use in order to kind of coordinate where people were going. And you're gonna see this in the slide later, but you want to try to limit it to 3 students per person if you can. We did a fairly good job of this. There was like maybe one or two places where we had a bunch of people rotate, which is kind of what you want to avoid. But I mean, at the end of the day, you do kind of take into account where you see yourself being. So hopefully you guys are going to be able to cordially, talk about where you want to go. And I think it only helps you like being transparent. No one should be out to get, each other, because at the end of the day, we all want to match. So you go to the next slide.
I think you took someone's slide out.
Did I?
Sorry, I can't see what I had sent to the group. Was someone supposed to talk about that?
Yeah, no, see, I meant to put this one further down because I didn't see that it was in there. So on my updated slideshow, it says that it's actually slide 10. But
Oh, weird. Okay. All right, whatever. If
Like-
someone could just like follow the email that I sent, I can't pull it up on my phone. I just so everyone can get a chance to talk.
Yeah.
Okay. Whoever
Yeah,
I send this to.
I think I'm supposed to do these components.
That's good.
Yeah, so I'd say Al and Julia kind of covered probably 80%, if not 90% of what you need to know. This is more logistical, and I think that the name of the game for this is really just being organized from the onset. There's a lot of very silly, in my opinion, requirements that you have to do for a number of different programs. I believe in Pennsylvania, for example, we had to get like a fingerprint or kind of like FBI screening thing, which is actually a little bit more annoying than it might seem. So I think what I would encourage you to do, you can go to the next slide. Kind of like with regards to like the last point on the last slide where it said program specific requirements will vary. Once you're aware of the broad ways that you're generally considering, I think that kind of looking at kind of like the page that's up here, for example, where it says application requirements and making sure that you've collected all of that stuff very early on, is kind of like that should be like one of your main goals, because right when the application's open, a lot of people are already going to have every single thing kind of ready to submit. They'll just kind of upload everything and submit. You don't want to kind of have it such that an application for an away opens and you're like, oh no, I haven't gotten my vaccines or my TB test or my urine drug screen, because in reality, these things ultimately take longer than a day, for example. Sometimes it takes days, if not a week, to get an appointment for a lot of these things. Criminal history, I'm fairly certain that was a huge pain in the ass for me to get. I had to like drive 45 minutes away from like the general Piscataway area to do it. So I think that like being aware of the programs you're generally kind of interested in and what the requirements are from the onset, I think that could be really beneficial for you. It's never too early, as you can see here where it says CV and resume. It's never too early to start kind of like updated that and formatting that so you're ready to kind of submit it. Every time you have a new project that changes status, like submitted or kind of like, under progress or accepted, like update them kind of sequentially, just so you don't have to kind of do it all at once. I think that that's definitely beneficial. And then I think another thing, I think one of the ways I did, I think it was Hopkins actually, they required a letter of recommendation. So I think that early on, it's kind of helpful for you, especially now. I think, it's never too early to start thinking about who you're going to ask for your letters of recommendations. Obviously, some people will get them on their ways, especially in months of like July and August. But especially with regards to your Robert Wood mentors, these are people you've known for at this point for 3 years. You can start to really consider, okay, this is probably someone that I'm going to try and work with on my sub-I so I can, secure that letter of rec. So, it's a good time, as Al said, start drafting a personal statement, start trying to figure out who is going to write your letters, and then kind of from there on out, like organizing everything. Because if you can do this process really well and really systematically, by the time it ultimately comes down to ERAS, you don't really have that much work to do. You can just kind of submit everything and you're good to go. You can go to the next slide. I think I covered everything there.
Sorry, to add on what John said about keeping your CV updated, I think I might have mentioned it later. On ERAS, when you enter your experiences, you get 750 characters. So that includes spaces to talk about each of your things. Of those, and I think you get 10 experiences. And then of those 10, you can indicate 3 that are the most meaningful. And then you get 300 extra characters to talk about those things. So honestly, the thing that was most time intensive for me was rewording like my blurbs on my CV to fit those character requirements, because I had written too much and like I really needed to distill those items down to the most important thing. So it is time consuming. just like changing your like, reworking sentences to meet the requirements. If that's something that you guys can like, do during break or whatever, you'll be in good shape for you guys. Okay, I think personal statement. Oh,
Yeah, I mean,
yes,
they
Nick.
covered all the important stuff for this. Al, the biggest thing is what Al said, which is get it started early, and you can actually get this started early because it's gonna be just as hard to do as your ass one. Just it's less important. It's like I said, there's important and how much they actually read this is unclear. We've heard that a lot of the time the coordinators at the programs are the ones who are picking the applicants who get the spots, and so maybe faculty don't even see it. But you can use this as a template for your actual ERAS procedure, which is what I did. I mean, I worked pretty hard on the VSLO ones because I was like kind of freaking out. And then I realized afterwards it probably didn't matter. But then when I was doing ERAS, it was like, super easy to finish it up because I had spent so much time working on it for the various rotations that I had applied to. Because some of them will ask more specific questions. Some of them just personal statement, very vague. A few of them will be like, tell us about why our program or something like that. And you still have to open with why ortho and then go to their program. So it's just like the hardest thing is to get it on paper. There's no hard and fast, consistent, I think, advice that I've ever heard for what to put on it, except for, and people can disagree with me who did this, but it's like don't put sports injuries or that kind of thing on there. I feel like that's probably the most universal concrete advice we ever heard. Obviously, what you're gonna have is gonna be cliche to some extent because like all these things, it's gonna be there's kind of core of things that people generally lean to for why they want to do this when they don't have any actual experience doing surgery because we're not surgeons yet. So just work on it, maybe run it by people. I mean, I'm sure I don't want to volunteer anybody else, but if you guys have questions, I'm happy to like look at your essays and just like, see how it would come across to someone who doesn't know you as well and is just like reading it for the first time. I think that was helpful when I had people above me looking at it too, to kind of rule out the more kind of cliche nonsense, that kind of thing. But
Yeah.
overall, don't freak out too much about it because again, these aren't overly important. But you want to make sure
Yeah.
it's done and be organized and have it on time, like they said, because these processes can be a pain. Like I had to go get a background check done, and that took longer than I thought. And so, but overall, I think the best thing is to use this as an opportunity to kind of get a rough draft hammered out for your actual personal statement, and then it'll save you a lot of like pain when you're on a ways and have to finish ERAS.
Yeah, I did not follow Nick's advice, and I kind of saved this to the end. I did a shitty job on this personal statement, and then geared myself a little bit when it came to writing the real thing, just because I feel like I was starting from scratch. But it, I think it's don't kill yourself over this, but like everyone said, use it as an opportunity just to like practice getting your thoughts onto paper and do your best. And throughout your rotations, if you have other experiences or like clinical situations you want to highlight or like other realizations that you've had, like use that as a template to change it because ultimately you don't want to send the same. Actually, I don't really know if it matters, but I was gonna say you probably don't want to submit the same personal statement for VSLO that you do for ERS. But again, I don't know. I don't know if anyone's really reading the VSLO one. But.
So funny enough, I didn't change my personal statement at all.
Really?
I felt like I had a really good personal statement, and it was even funnier thing is that my personal statement wasn't too different from what I wrote for going into medical school. Like I maybe added one or two things from what happened in medical school, but it was pretty much the same thing. And I also wrote about an injury. But that being said, like it's your story, right? So no one's gonna like if it's cliche, whatever. But if you're gonna write about an injury, it better really have meaning. And it can't be like the whole reason why you want to go into orthopedics, because that is a dumb reason, honestly. There has to be more substance to it. So like if you're gonna do it, I would only write like maybe a sentence and a brief one at that. But it has to be fitting. Um, but that's when you lean on your mentors. That's when you lean on other people who are reading it to see if it's worth it.
No, I agree with Al. It's when I said don't write about an injury, it was like don't say like I tore my ACL in high school playing football and that's why I want to do ortho. Like that's like the example they give where it's like but the thing is, ultimately, the problem with that is everything you're going to write is going to be cliche to some extent because they get thousands of these applications every year. That was the point I was trying to make. So, like, I talked about woodworking, very cliche, but I didn't like focus very heavily on it. I talked more about how I watched a show with my dad that related to that got me interested into it. But then I kind of shifted. I don't want to spend too much time harping on this, like, oh, I work with my hands, that kind of thing, right? So there's going to be something that is cliche, but you want to make it sound kind of original, and there is a way to do that because that's kind of the test. I feel like is can you take this broad topic where you really don't actually have that many options of things to talk about and make it sound unique to you, which is why it's so hard and why it's so important and helpful to get it on paper first. Because once you have a structure, even if it's really shitty, you can like get it organized. And then as you get closer and closer to ERAS, you'll have time to iterate and iterate and iterate, and you'll be able to just kind of have it cooking in the back of your head, and you'll be able to get something that's like polished that you're happy with. And I'm with Al. I actually barely changed my statement. I just made it like a bit longer and a bit more, relevant to the residency programs. But other than that, it's pretty similar. So I was happy with it. Sorry, John. I keep seeing you on mute. Go ahead.
Oh, you're good, dude. I was just gonna say I did the exact same thing as Nick and Al. Like my personal statement from med school didn't really change very much. I added a few kind of like obvious insights that I gained over the course of medical school. I have like a hot kind of, piece, like this might be a hot take, but my personal kind of view is that I don't think there's any absolutes. I don't think you can't write about an injury, as Nick and Al said. I think you can do whatever you want. I think that ultimately at the end of the day, you just have to remember that you're selling yourself because this is a job interview, right? Whatever you think your story is and whatever you think makes you unique, you should just sell that in whatever way you see fit. Obviously, run it by a lot of people so you can get a lot of, perspectives on it. But I think that's the whole point of ERAS. And I think that when it ultimately comes to looking at your meaningful experiences as well, try and think to yourself, okay, I wrote my personal statement about woodworking, for example. What are 3 meaningful experiences that I can use to supplement that and kind of build a persona of someone that I'm trying to kind of portray to these residency programs? Because at the end of the day, like everyone's going to choose like a varsity sport, everyone's going to do like like something leadership they did, but I think it's up to you to try and find your own unique twist and the way you can kind of highlight in your ERAS application.
Excellent advice. Does anyone have questions about the personal statement? I feel like that was a lot of information.
Also, it's not that important for the SLO. We're saying teach
Yeah.
as an opportunity, but like for now, for the short term, you guys don't have to worry about it too much. But like it will save you some pain later if you just get it down for these statements early.
Yeah. I followed the Ortho Mentor guide. It's nothing like revolutionary, but I did think it was just helpful to kind of follow that format. And like that personal anecdote that everyone was kind of talking about. I talked about mummies and I spent 2 sentences on it and then moved on. Like I tried to create a theme and highlight that theme as like the introduction, not in like trying not to do it in a cheesy way, but try and keep like that anecdote component to a minimum, like explaining the anecdote or the story to a minimum, and then focus on like tying everything back to that theme or whatever like your main takeaway was from that.
That actually also very good specific advice, actually. Like like I said, like you want to open with like just a quick anecdote about yourself because it helps characterize you and also helps them be interested. Like because at halftime they're going to give up halfway through the essay and not read the rest of it. And so if you can kind of just put something in there that's more interesting, like the generic schlock they usually read, then it's good. So like I said, my opening sentence about how I used to watch the show with my dad when he got home late from work. Like that was like the anecdote, and then I moved on. So that's actually something that's definitely a very good, I think, format to follow.
Yeah. All right.
One last comment. Sorry. Very last thing. I think a strong way to end it is also writing explicitly what you want out of a residency program, because that shows, because that can kind of be applied to pretty much any good residency program. So I feel like you explicitly saying what you want knows how sure you are about this. But yeah, continue.
Yeah. All right, Anisha.
All right. I feel like we've covered a lot of this already. I will say something about the personal statement since we've been on that topic for a while. I agree with pretty much what everyone said. I think there's many ways to do it. The only thing I'll kind of comment on is if you are applying for the scholarships, I think the personal statement is a little bit important. There is a committee for most of the programs that will read your personal statement. So if you are planning on applying for scholarships, I think you should try to make the personal statement as close to complete as possible. I was kind of lucky, like John and Al, I pretty much just changed like 1 paragraph from my med school essay and like tied it into med school, but otherwise it was pretty much verbatim for my med school essay. But if that's not the case for you, I think it's a good idea to get started. I just like some advice that I use like the prior M4s who are now interns. They read my essays. I had like chief residents at other programs read my essay. Dr. Cott and Dr. McPartland are always like available and helpful. The deans also are super helpful. Dean Meehan's my dean. He like read my essay and gave me like some advice. You obviously don't have to use everyone's advice, but I think it's helpful to get as many eyes as possible. I think some of the residents who have recently matched are also helpful because they kind of went through this process and might have some insights about specific programs. So that's pretty much it. Personal statement. Getting ready for VSO. I mean, we kind of talked about all this. I'd say the only thing is there's like an ERAS healthcare or like immunization form that's super important. I actually realized during this process that I hadn't seen like a primary care since like med school. So I had to set up an appointment with a new like primary care physician. I did it during Christmas time, actually. I just like flew home and got that done. And sort of what everyone else said, it took like 2 weeks for them to fill out the forms, and then they told me when it was ready. So just keep that in mind. And for the most part, I think most programs will accept these forms. There's some variations. So again, just look into the programs you're interested in because like for example, MIMO had their own set of healthcare forms, which were slightly different and they wanted it filled out in exactly their way. So then I had to go back to my like primary care and get them to fill that one out. So just kind of keep that in mind. But once like your physician fills it out the first time, it's usually much faster when they fill it out the second time since they're just signing it at that point. Headshot, it's if you have like a med school headshot, you can use that for the VSLO one. I don't think it's that important. And then eventually the school does like free headshots, I think 2 or 3 times throughout the summer. So if you're available to do that, you can just go and get your VSLO headshot there. Beyond that, for research programs, I think like the only advice I have, the easiest thing was to talk to older students for me. I think we're very lucky to come from a big ortho program, and a lot of students go to like all the programs beyond maybe some of the California ones or like kind of the West programs. It was really helpful to like hear their advice and kind of like figure out what the best fit programs were for me. So I'd definitely say reach out to any of us. I'll put my email in too, and any of the other older senior students. And if you don't have their contact, there's always someone that can get it for you. And if not, like even like Dr. Gatt or Dr. McPartland will connect you with a resident who's like a Robert Wood alum, even if they're like a 4th year resident or a 5th year resident and you don't have their contact. I'd say the biggest thing is that you can send your resumes over to residents at certain programs. They can take a look at it, kind of like they sometimes have insight and see if you're like a good fit for the program. So I think my like biggest key takeaway from my experience was just talk to as many people as you can.
Yeah. Definitely agree. One thing about the immunizations, you can get it done for free at like the FAMmed student health. So with like in New Brunswick. So just print out like that form and then you can make an appointment. It shouldn't cost you anything. But you make sure that you don't pay because you're not supposed to. I've gotten burned before and had to pay like a $30 copay.
I think that's only if you're on student healthcare, because I know I'm not.
Yeah, and if you're like established with them. So like, I tried to do that and they were like, our next appointment is 3 months from now. And I was like, that's not helpful.
Well, you can get in early now if you want.
Yeah. So I guess, I guess. I did mine at City MD.
I just emailed the form to student health and they sent it back to me filled out. I know you have to go in.
Nice.
So the key point is just do it early so that you don't have to do it later.
Yeah, and also another important thing with immunizations, you'll see some programs will require that like certain things like TB, for example, have to be, the test has to be done within 3 months of your start date. And if you're doing 3 or 4 sub-Is and you want to avoid having to do multiple quantiferon gold tests, like try and strategize like when the best time to do it. So I think winter break is a good time to just like take inventory of things that may be expired, like, finding all of your proof of titers and everything that you had to submit for med school, and looking at the programs that you're planning on applying to and seeing if there's any weird extra things that they're requiring so that you could take as few trips and pay as few copays as possible. Because I spent a lot of money doing this because I didn't have my shit together. Okay. I think Al kind of touched on this. Kevin, do you want to talk about this a little bit?
Sorry.
Yeah, I'll pretty much talk a lot about this, but I think it's very important to discuss this with your classmates. We all a lot of people have certain preferences of wanting to go to certain programs, just because they know people there, or they know they want to experience the program. So definitely, I think we did a fairly good job of talking with each other and respecting each other's interest about, I want to attend this program because I just have certain interest in that. So definitely for sure try to create a spreadsheet, something that we did and Al showed earlier about like where people listed where they were going and when. And so that way you try to coordinate, if you guys want to go to the same, same institution, going at different time slots would be, would be nice. But just something that I also heard throughout my sub-eyes as well was like, if, if possible, trying not to all go to one spot just because you all go in the same institution doesn't necessarily mean that may all interview you, which it's scary because you spend the whole month there, you try to learn the program and they know you, but they may not give you that interview. So just keep that in mind as well. But again, talk with each other, respecting one another, and then and then also just making known that if you have a certain preference, you can choose that as well. And just about also as well the certain scholarships. So I, definitely chose and looked at programs where they also was actively trying to recruit minority students. So definitely looking at those programs and seeing what they had to offer, whether it be like a visiting scholarship for students, whether they provided housing, things like that. That was also interesting for me. And then also for the application and the essay itself, I use like the base was like a med school essay, and then like using different scholarship essays that I used throughout my career in med school so far, and then picking out little bits to try to like not do everything from like scratch, but then just making things a little bit more efficient in that way. So that way, when I came for ERES, it was pretty much almost done. I just had to tweak it, a little bit then and there, but pretty much it's again just talking with each other, and then just being respectful of each other's interests.
All right, these last. Oh, I forgot this one. Oh, I added this because this is also something I fucked up. As soon as you get a sub-I or like it's confirmed, you need to email the registrar confirmation of each of your sub-Is in order for them to be registered in Oasis or whatever they use. And they will give you all this information, so don't worry about it. And I don't know if things have changed from last year to this year, but they're very specific with the language that these sub-Is have to have in order for them to count as a sub-I, or like toward reducing your your Robert Wood Johnson required sub internship. I'm not sure if they talked to you guys about that already. But they specifically have to say like sub intern, acting internship, role of an intern. If they don't contain those words, the elective does not count toward reducing your Robert Wood Johnson required sub-I. Another important thing I encountered is that if you'll see that the blocks of like all of these sub-Is tend to overlap, and that doesn't mean that you can't do them. Program directors or administrators were very understanding that like you would accept the sub-I, but then send them an email and say like, I'm finishing up at Jefferson this day, could I start this day? And for the most part, everybody was very understanding. I'm sure people also encountered that. But before you send your sub-Is to the registrar, make sure you request those changes and have the new dates in writing, because if there's overlap in the dates that you're submitting to the registrar, they won't register the elective.
I will, yeah, just so they're pretty loose with the sub intern thing. For one of mine, I just got I didn't say it in the course description. I just got an email from one of the chiefs that had an attachment called sub-I schedule, and I sent a screenshot of an email with the attachment. They're like, all right, good enough. But then some programs actually are pretty inflexible. Like a lot of them are, but then there are some that like we're not changing any. Like I asked preemptively because I saw things like lining up before I applied, and they were like, no, let's get start this day, and we're not gonna like make any changes.
Okay.
So it is worth finding out beforehand. I don't know how many of them were like that, but the ones that were like that, I just didn't end up going to because I was like, I'd rather get more in than having like my schedule screwed up. But I would say like 70% seem to follow a similar timeline. It's just the ones that if you want to go to the bunch of those and one that's not on the same schedule, it might screw things up a little bit. But I'm glad to hear that other people didn't have the same problem.
I think a very important point to take from Julia's kind of little spiel there is that the orthopedic sub-I at Robert Wood does not currently count as a core sub-I, which he probably already mentioned. But because of that, you need to do 4 weeks of internal medicine, surgery, OB-GYN, or maybe psych or something like that. But if you're consistent and very proactive about sending the registrar each one of your completion and graded forms, like as you're finishing each of them, you can get reduced from 4 to 2 weeks. So you don't have to spend like a month talking about, hyponatremia or, things along that line if you would prefer not to do that.
Yeah, another important thing to add is that you need, even after submitting all of these evaluations and getting them approved, you still need to formally ask the registrar 30 days before your elective or before your sub-I to get it reduced. I missed that part. So I am spending 4 weeks talking about hyponatremia. So don't do that. Don't do extra work if you don't have to. It's a pain in the ass, but just set yourself a reminder. I think I was just like in the middle of a busy block and I missed it, but it's dumb. They're going to send a million emails, really long emails. Just try and read them. I clearly did not. Okay.
Another point, sorry, not sure if this is going to be talked about later, but okay, I don't think it is. So you still get a grade from this, and programs know that, but they often drop the ball. I remember it took me like almost a month and a half to get the elective grade for my first sub-I, and they need that in order to want to confirm that you actually did the sub-I in order to reduce it to 2 weeks. So when you're done with the sub-I, like whatever, you can send like a thank you email. Try to not badger them, but I would say like maybe a week or two after you're done, send an email to the program coordinator where you did your sub-I saying, hey, like my registrar is asking for these grades, like what's the update? Because then they'll remember and they'll get it to you pretty quick. But if you don't remind them, then you may be waiting for a while. And you want to have those grades, especially if you did well on your MISPE, because other schools see that, like if you honored a rotation or whatever. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, good point. I forgot what the cutoff for the MISPE information was, but I think only my like comments for my first sub-I, my first OA, which was in August, was on my MISPE. Obviously, if you start earlier than that, it can be earlier, but good points.
I had three. So
oh, nice. All right.
I think I also asked them to delay it, right? Because they need to have it uploaded by like September 20 something at the latest, because that has to be in before places can download your ERAS application. So if you're kind of on top of it, and then you speak with the registrar and be like, hey, like they said they sent this grade, like where is it? Can you add it to MISPE? And then they'll do it for you. So the more grades that like these programs see, because we don't have like step one or whatever, the better it is in your favor, I think, at least.
Yeah. Okay. These next things, these are not, like John said, these are not absolutes. I think these are generally tend to be true. Some people may disagree. I encourage you to offer your other opinions, because like I said, there's no absolutes, and I don't think there's not a right or wrong way to do all this. But in general, if you're on time, you're late. If you're dismissed, go home. If the resident tells you to sleep on call, sleep. I know that's an unpopular one, but to be honest, like I wasn't getting 6 hours of sleep while the resident was seeing consults. I was closing my eyes for an hour and a half before, we had to wake up and run the list in the morning. Feel free to disagree. If your resident tells you to eat. Talk to your teams about ahead of time about expectations. Oftentimes my programs gave me like a contact, and I would text them as soon as I got that and just ask if, they could set up a quick phone call, just to talk about, expectations, just what to expect, general like time commitment, all that stuff. This is not new. Like you need to be prepared. You need to know the anatomy. You need to know the approach. Don't wear your white coat unless you're explicitly told to. And always make sure you have shears, a regular pen and a marking pen. Buy multiple pairs of shears. They will get dull, and you don't want to be in that position. Anybody have any differing thoughts or things to add? This is not exhaustive by any stretch, but
I was
good place to start.
yeah, I mean that's all right. I think that we've done a lot at them. I feel like we could just do like once they actually have their sub-Is confirmed, might be more useful to like set up a meeting specifically for being good sub-I rather than trying to get too into the weeds today, just because like they got other stuff going on.
Yeah. One big thing that Dr. Monica taught me, and then I think he also stole it from Dr. Levine when he was at Columbia, you got to have the 3 A's, right? So you have to be available, affable, and able. If you keep that in mind, you'll do great.
My dad told me that too.
All right. And then the last thing that we included, oh, sorry, second lesson. These are just resources that I use commonly on my rotations. Most of them are free. Beside, I paid for Pocket Pimped, and I'm sure you can get Handbook of Fractures for free. You'll kind of figure out your own approach to how you prepare for cases. And again, we don't have to go into the weeds of this today, but I think these are pretty high yield from just talking to friends.
There's also an Anki deck that kind of has pocket pimped in there. So if you don't want to buy
Nice.
it. And also like I found the Anki deck to be super helpful. I think it's like Martin's something.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Martin
Because
McFly, I
like if
think.
you like are doing a specific very niche case, you just like type the word in, you'll find like 10 Anki cards is better than like knowing nothing.
Yeah.
So it's just very helpful to like know like easy pimping questions that they typically ask.
Agreed.
Yes, some of these resources, including the Anki deck, are available to download on our OSIG Canvas page. So if someone doesn't have access to it, like shoot me a text or an email and I'll give you the access.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, this is the last slide, I promise. These are just some general tips for asking for letters of recommendations during ways. We can, again, go into more details about this later. This was just advice that was given to me and things I found to be helpful. When you're out and away, I think it's generally a good idea to ask residents who's known to be either like a good letter writer, receptive to writing letters, who's going to do it on time. It's always a good idea once you've identified an attending, like to ask at the beginning of the rotation or the block of time that you're going to be with them, and kind of like plant the seed that, you know, you're hoping to ask for a letter at the end of the rotation, and that, you know, kind of keys them in and you know, tells them to like pay more attention to you during, you know, your step by. If someone offers to write you a letter of recommendation, you should accept it. Don't worry about if you're going to use it or where you're going to use it. Just say yes. That's a huge compliment. And you never know when you're going to need it. Don't ask someone for the sake of having a big name letter writer. It's way more important to have somebody who knows you and who can speak to your abilities and someone who you worked with intimately than, you know, a big name surgeon who maybe you spent an afternoon with and who really doesn't know you. Like that, program directors will see through that. It'll probably be a bad letter. I think that's pretty universal advice that I received. In general, programs reviewing your application, like that you apply to, won't know where you did your aways unless you have letters from attendings at that institution. You could work that to your advantage if you know there's just, you know, a specific region that you want to be in, and maybe you want to have your at least your first or second away rotations be in that area or from an attending in that area, so that all the other programs in that area that are reading your application that you applied to but didn't rotate at, you know, kind of believe it more when you say that you have a preference for the Mid-Atlantic or whatever it is. And in general, most programs required 3 to 4 letters. So as long as you have 4, I think you're in a good spot.
And don't be afraid to get like a non-ortho letter. I know there's some programs that need that, like UCSF. So if you're trying to apply to UCSF, definitely get a non-ortho letter. But yeah, and if you get like a non-ortho letter, I think if it's one that you know you work with them for a while, it's probably still going to be an awesome letter. So don't
Yeah. For
It's
sure.
okay to have more than 4. Like I had 6 or something, and and then you can kind of tailor them to the programs you're applying to. So like it says, like programs won't know you rotated somewhere unless you have a letter from that school, you know, from that place. So maybe if you feel like you don't have a connection to an area, but you did a rotation there, maybe you want to use that letter, you know, and like you got time like sneak one letter from that program, you can toss that one to all the ones that might be in that region, so they know that you actually, you know, came up there and spent time. But then you don't have to use that one for all of your applications, right? You kind of tailor which ones you use.
Yeah. And Dr. Gatt writes everybody a chair letter. Some programs will explicitly require the chair letter, others won't. I think I ended up sending it to almost all of them. But definitely agree with Nick and try to be strategic about like knowing where people trained and where they have connections and sending those letters to those programs.
And just because Dr. Gatt does it for everyone doesn't mean that you don't need to ask. You still need to ask him. So don't take that for granted. And
it's still a good idea to, you know, regardless of how well you think you know him, to set up a meeting either like before your sub-I or during your, I did it during my sub-I, just to like check in with him, talk about how things are going. I think it's just, you know, good form, but also like allows him to get to know you a little bit better and what you're looking for, and ultimately just can make your letter a bit more personal. You don't have to do it in person. You could be Zoom or phone call, but I definitely would recommend like going beyond just sending an email. That is all that we had in terms of like slide content. Sorry, one last thing. After this talk, Diana is going to send out our away rotation spreadsheet, and also our home sub by spreadsheet. Al and I handled splitting up services and call for the 2 blocks. We also created kind of like a tip sheet for the students who decide to take that task on, with just like logistic information and contacts and how to do all that stuff. And then Diana will also send out the AAMC standard immunization form. You can also Google it, but I figured it would be helpful to have in one spot. But yeah, that is all the information. Oh, go ahead.
So I was just gonna add to the list. I'm also gonna send a list of like most recent graduates that matched in ortho with their contact information that we have. And some of the people were asking if it's okay to send out this PowerPoint. So if that's okay, I'll also send that out.
Yeah. Sounds good. Do
So
people
now
have
we
questions?
can, yeah, I was just gonna say like we have a few minutes for questions. So guys, please go ahead.